Hey there, Internet. Welcome to the Hard On Gear channel, where I discuss and review my used and abused knives and gear. All right, looking at the Leatherman OHT one-handed tool. This is going to be more of an overview and kind of a first impression than an actual review. This is not my knife slash multi-tool. This is one of my platoon buddies. It's a multi-tool that I've looked at purchasing before, but I ended up going with the Signal for kind of my old line of work running around the woods. And then in the new military world here, I got the Leatherman Mutt, which is a little more tailored to working on AR platform rifles and that kind of thing. Pretty much about the same price as most of the other smaller multi-tools like the Wave and the Super Tool. The more popular ones around the $100 US range, maybe 130, 120. A lot of Canadian stores, maybe plus or minus $10, depending on where you're buying. Don't buy it like Cabela's or Canadian Tire or something like that. If you can find it on a good local knife store, you're probably going to save like 20, 30 bucks. Sorry, Cabela's, sorry, Canadian Tire, not going to get sponsored by you anytime soon. That's fine. But I believe at least 3 or 4 guys on my platoon had them, and they're a fairly popular multi-tool by Leatherman. One-handed tool, OHT, meaning that they can be operated with one hand only. All the tools are accessible with the flick of a thumb, finger, or as you can see with the pliers, just a little flick of the wrist, as long as you're holding the side. And once you get used to it, it's pretty easy. It doesn't take too much force once they're broken in, but I'm just trying to keep it on frame here, and yeah, you can see, if not super easy to do with a small range of motion. So if you were trying to do this in a confined space, you might have an issue, and if in that case, you can just slide it up with the buttons here on the side. A little awkward, but it can be done still with one hand. But if I put a little more force into it, yeah, see, they fly open. And that's something I want to talk about too. That knife, I've noticed that fly open. And the pivot for these tools is, the name of that will come to me, or if I'll get it after and I'll post it up here in the text. But the Torx head with the hole in the middle is a big pain in the ass. And I don't have the tools to do that, so I can't really adjust and tighten that knife blade up. If I'm trying to open this and I'm holding the side with the saw, as you can see from the illustration there, it does actually show where all the tools are located on the knife. If I hold it on this side and really whip it open, oh, not so bad that time, but you see even there, that knife just barely popped out, and that tip's available to snag clothing or nick skin, or you can even, I've gouged myself pretty bad on the finger by having a knife blade open like that in my pocket. So just something to be aware of. Maybe Leatherman could work on that, or maybe make a little more accessible Torx head to be able to adjust that on your own. As for carry options, there's no way to attach a clip to this as far as I know. The Leatherman Signal and Mutt come with their own little certain carry clips. The Mutt's pretty specific, but this one here's a little more generic on the Signal. I don't see any way that you could possibly fasten that on, and the way it's designed, you're pretty much stuck, I think, either throwing this in your pocket or using the nylon sheath that comes with it. A little bit different from the standard one. Most of the Leathermans that you're gonna pick up have this little basic nylon sheath with the one little overlapping snap, a little bit of elastic on the side, and just the single belt loop to go through on the back, or you could potentially attach that to some MOLLE, although it's just a single point of contact, so not super great. The sheath that comes with the OHT, however, is a little bit different. A little bit of one extra little MOLLE attachment there, and you could attach this to something if you wanted to, but it does just kind of go through like that if you want to attach it onto your belt. What kind of a pro like that is that you can actually put that on once your belt's already on. You don't have to go re-looping everything, as opposed to say something like that where you do have to take your belt off. Bit of a pain in the butt. One extra pro with that one. The other thing is you've got the ability to put a little piece of paracord through the bottom part of this flap if you want just a little bit of extra, like easier pull if you were wearing a pair of gloves or something, just to rip that and get it open. Otherwise, pretty standard sheath, and there's that one little extra pocket on the inside here to stick whatever you wanted, but do not stick the bit kits in there, because the bit kits are not compatible with the Leatherman OHT. So if you have a bunch of bits lying around, or you planned on getting some extra ones for this, they're not compatible the same way as they are with some of the other Leatherman tools, so just keep that in mind. If the nylon sheaths aren't really what you're looking for, there are some aftermarket options, like the Kydex sheath I've got here for the Mutt. Just kind of slides in like so, and wear it on your hip like that. And this actually works pretty darn well. I did lose one of the screws for this, but once it's both screws in there, it's pretty damn tight. I've even tried it upside down. It's pretty sturdy, but it works fairly well. It's a good option, and they do make different aftermarket ones for the OHT like this. The tools on this really quickly, I'll go through them. You can see on the illustration there, knife knife blade, kind of handy to be able to see on the outside. The knife blade and the saw and everything are a little bit shorter on this than on some of the Leatherman models. I'll do a little size comparison after, but just something to keep in mind. If you're going to be using the tools extensively, more so than the pliers, and you're not too worried about the one-handed feature, maybe go with something else with a little more capable tools, because the one-handed function of the pliers takes away some of the room. So pretty much every tool I think on this is a little bit short and a little bit maybe thinner even. Opposite to the knife is the saw blade, and like all the other Leatherman saws, the blades are super nice for pretty much any wood. It is a wood saw. So the only issue with this again is that the length of this saw is, I'll haul the Leatherman signal out. Yeah, significantly smaller, at least, yeah, damn near an inch less of a saw blade, or I guess even as I put the bladed part of there. Yeah, so about half an inch, but still more than enough to make a difference. If you're dragging this across anything more than like 3 or 4 inches, you're gonna run out of room really quick, and you're gonna be doing little tiny saw motions for about 2 hours trying to get through a piece of wood. Can be done. Now with something like that where you're losing the extra half an inch, I could see this being an issue for anything like remotely large. Sawing through this pen wouldn't be a big issue. Sawing through something a little thicker diameter, you don't really have enough blade to do a lot of work. So by the way, don't use a wood saw to saw through a work sharpener. Disclaimer. So that's the one side here, and these are all liner lock, by the way, and can be all operated with one hand. A little awkward for some of these. Here's the other thing. They can be operated with one hand, but sometimes it's easier to use certain things like the knife, easier to deploy with my right hand, and well, with anyone's right hand, than it is with my left hand, because I have to do this little reverse flick on the back, and I'm at risk of kind of slicing my finger when I do that. So if you're one of those people who actually is missing a hand and you ordered this tool because you want to be able to operate it with one hand, just keep in mind that if you're missing, say, your right hand, and you want to use the knife a lot, you're going to have a little bit of an issue, or at least have a little bit more of an adjustment period getting used to opening and closing it. A little bit weird thing, but I guess they're trying to, hold strong to the gimmick of you're able to operate everything on this tool with one hand. They didn't say you can operate it super optimally with one hand. But on the underside of the knife and saw side of the knife, you've got the Phillips head, pretty small, pretty thin. I wouldn't do a whole lot of prying or twisting with that, but still fairly sturdy. And again, a liner lock. I just tried to close it without it, didn't work. Liner lock on the driver bits as well. There's the small flathead. Works as a pretty good pry bar, and this actually works good for I won't actually say on camera what it's good for, but there's a lot of different prying and twisting things and moving metal parts that you might have to get in between, and a thin little screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver like that comes in really handy. So the thicker one's great. That thinner one, I can see this one's been used a lot for some different stuff. So super good to have multiple driver head options. On the other side of the knife, you've got the thicker and a much wider flathead. Liner lock, same thing. And on the opposite end of that, you have a bottle opener, can opener, not too sharp on one end, but that little bit of a chisel grind to get through cans. And I've used these for cans quite a bit in the woods, and they actually work fairly decent. Okay, back to the side with the longer Phillips head here. So the long bladed objects we've got are the saw, which serrated blade rather, which is going to get through any rope or cordage a lot better than most of the other blade options you have here. You know, a lot of the Spyderco, Pacific Salt and Atlantic Salt knives, different ones that are fully serrated, and the whole point of them is to be like dive knives that you can use for cutting cordage and rope underwater and stuff. So these kind of serrations work incredibly good for almost any fibrous material. Same thing if you had some like a rooted material in that and you don't want it. The saw sometimes will get caught and snagged, doesn't work too well. The serrated knife works really well, and I've actually used some of the different blades for digging holes in the ground when I didn't have a shovel or any kind of hand tool on me. So it does work quite well. The only issue is you've got dirt and all kinds of other stuff inside of all these liner locks and the pivots, so you do have to clean it out and oil it fairly often. If you're using it like an idiot. If you use it like a normal person, you're probably going to be fine. Then speaking of the pivot, I do believe I put a little bit of frog lube in the pivot or the glide of this when I was playing with it before, because at first these OHTs come incredibly stiff and a little bit hard to operate with that one-handed flicking action. You really do have to put a lot of weight behind it. So a little bit of lube in the rails works pretty well. Oh, and speaking of, while we're on, do we have any? Oh, let's go over that last knife blade, or last, I guess, main tool of the knife, which is the gut hook / seatbelt cutter / whatever else you could want to use that for. Again, actually for cordage, that would work quite well to be able to stag a little piece of paracord or rope or something, or twine in there. And one of the videos, it was Nick Shabazz or Gideon's Tactical or somebody talking about how if you only did have one hand and you were cutting like cordage or like just nipping threads or something, you could one hand and kind of catch some cordage without having to stabilize with the other hand, kind of rip and pull while you were doing something with the other hand. So there is a nice cutting use for that, as well as an emergency seatbelt cutter, as well as, I guess, maybe a gut hook if for some reason you had to entirely gut clean an animal with a Leatherman, which Jordan Jonas, season 6 of Alone, I think that was his, did a whole, like, processed a whole moose with a Leatherman, I don't know, rebar or super tool or something like that. And anyways, side tangents over. I think we've done all the tools on this knife. We talked about everything about the pliers, actually. So the pliers are needle nose. You can see there's space pretty much through all the teeth. You got the wider spot here at the bottom, and then as it gets narrower towards the tip, it actually just comes in contact with the very tip, so you can actually get pretty precise with these. The wire cutters are replaceable. A lot of the Leatherman tools these days are, so if you go on Leatherman's website, you can order their replacement kits for pretty cheap. And if they happen to break through some kind of a weird use that's not just your own over abuse of them, like if you're trying to wire cut some denser material or harder steel, that's your fault. But Leatherman's 25-year limited warranty covers a lot of stuff that happens to the multi-tool itself, so long as it's manufacturer default and not your own brain default. The wire cutters are 154 cm, which is a much better steel than anything else on this knife. It'd be a shame, or it'd be nice rather, if they could just put that on the knife blade and the saw and the serrated blade. But the rest of it is 420 HC, which is standard on most buck knives, Swiss Army knives, Leatherman tools. And like those other big companies, Leatherman's pretty damn good with the heat treat compared to some cheaper companies who can give you 420 HC, but it might as well be 440A or some other cheap garbage steel. So the steel's still good on this. You're going to want to touch it up or keep stropping it every now and then to keep the blade up. Same thing with the gut hook and that. If you can put that in through a little bit of I guess some different ceramic files and stuff would work in the gut hook, and there's different gut hook sharpeners on some different little field sharpeners and that you'll find. But there's options to sharpen that. But again, won't be as big of an issue to keep it up because it is a pretty, not a soft steel, but not as good as the wire cutters, which again, replaceable, but should stand up to quite a bit because of the decent steel. Last little features to go over, there's a lock on the slide here for the pliers. So if you turn this little bottom piece, pivot that to, I guess it only goes one way, yeah, to the counterclockwise position while it's at the very bottom, that'll lock the tool out, and then no matter how hard you want to sling and fling this thing out, the pliers won't come out. Now, it's not as important as, say, like a lock on an OTF automatic knife, where if the button gets pressed and you stab yourself in the pocket, it's going to be way worse. Worst case, the pliers come out and you're going to be stabbed in the leg. It'll be uncomfortable. I don't know when you'd want to actually engage that. Like if it's in the sheath or it's in your pocket, it's probably not a big deal. Maybe if you were twisting and prying and working on using the screwdriver part, and your hand could potentially slip and hit that and it starts to creep up, maybe engage the lock, save yourself from that little bit of frustration. And as for retracting the pliers, there's a little bit of a lock at the top here, so you just go on, I think you have to do both. Yeah, you do. So one hand, just to press both of those little gray buttons, and she should slide right down, and then you can just continue to push it down. Or if you want to be extra lazy, just push and then turn it, depress it, and finish it off with your thumb. But either way, I'm trying to do this all with one hand on the video for the most part, just to try and at least test it out for myself, because I haven't handled this much. You're watching me handle this for maybe, I think, a third time. But this is, I think, the most time that I've spent really messing around with the tools and seeing how I could open it with one hand. So fairly easy to figure out, pretty intuitive. It's fairly well designed if you really need something like that. It's similar to a lot of the Gerber multi-tools that a lot of like our military, the Canadian military and US military carry, at least a vast majority of the members. Smaller, thinner, lighter multi-tool with a few more like rifle specific tools, but that also kind of pops open with that same mechanism and has the slides on the side. So there's comparable models out there. And speaking of comparable models, what I've got here, bring that Leatherman signal out again, and let's just look at the difference of that freaking saw and a couple of the knife blade here. So the saw, significantly shorter on the OHT. Still, again, pretty handy, and you're still gonna be able to do plenty of stuff with it. And if you're cutting like a large log or something like that, this isn't the tool you want anyways. You're probably better off using a fixed blade and batoning through it, just chipping it away at it, rather than trying to saw little notches with this. See the knife blade, combo knife on the signal, partial serration. And this one here, we've got the straight full chisel, no, full flat grind on this. I think it's some of the smaller Leathermans have a chisel grind, but this one is a, yeah, full flat high saber, same as that sucker there. Okay, now I gotta pull up my Leatherman squirt and just check here. Yeah, there it is. The squirt's got the little chisel grind on that little tiny blade that I don't think I've ever used. But there's Leatherman squirt for size reference. Certainly not quite as big or bulky. Knife blade, same issue as the saw. You got about probably 1/2 inch of extra cutting surface. Other than that, more or less the same thing. Combo knife on here limits you a little more, where you've got the option to go here with the, not the gut hook, the serrated knife. So again, shorter. Not a huge issue though if you're just cutting a bit of cordage. 2 inches of blade's plenty. Overall size, much larger than the Signal, and the Signal is fairly comparable to like Leatherman Wave, Sidekick. Rebar is a little bit larger. The Super Tool's probably a little bit larger, like in between the OHT and the Signal. The Leatherman Mutt that I've got over here is right around the same ballpark as the OHT, and one of the larger multi-tools that you're going to get. The Signal probably weighs, oh geez, yeah, maybe 2 or 3 ounces, maybe 2 ounces lighter than the OHT, which comes in around 8 or 9 ounces. And the Mutt's, I think, even heavier than that at around 10, but I'm just ballparking those numbers right now. To be honest, check the full reviews for these when they come out if you want all the full specs and details. Just a couple more to look at. Let's take a look at the Leatherman, or sorry, the Victorinox Pioneer X, so a little bit larger than some of your average little multi-tools or Swiss Army knives. And how about the Benchmade Gripetillion? Well, I've got it for a size comparison because that's going to be going on trade soon. And a couple of Spydercos, the Spyderco Paramilitary 2 and the Manix 2. About the same size as the Manix 2, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, and I should say the thickness of the OHT, about the same size as the Mutt or some of the larger ones. Definitely bigger than most Leatherman multi-tools. And again, if you really don't need the one-handed feature, you can probably get away with a rebar, or if you want to go fancy, like a charge or something. But the rebar, the Super Tool, the Wave, Sidekick, each one's got a little bit different tool set. You can find something that hits your specific needs. If you want something that looks a little bit beefier and definitely has a little bit more weight to it, and the one-hand operation, if you're doing some different construction jobs or anything where you really need to have one hand tied up on something, or working on ladders, that's the good Metal Complex reference he uses all the time. If you're working on ladders a lot and you only have one hand, that is pretty handy, unless, say, you go to deploy it and you throw your multi-tool like 3 stories downstairs. But anyways, the one-handed tool really isn't that necessary for most people. It's kind of gimmicky, but once you get used to it, it's like anything. You can pretty much... Oh, that was a bad deployment. Once you get used to it, the ability to just fling it out with one hand beats having to go through the slow process, especially with something like the Signal with a lock, of clicking the lock, opening it up with 2 hands, and then kind of getting the pliers set. Oh, and that reminds me, non-spring pliers on a lot of the Leatherman multi-tools, you do get spring-loaded pliers on the OHT, which is a super big bonus, and which is a super annoying thing that I don't know why they don't have in all Leathermans. So, oh, and a hello knife. Spring-loaded pliers, super handy, not necessary, but a big bonus. And I will say you can, with a lot of these Leathermans, actually get them broken into the point where you can sort of throw them out with one hand, but you're always at risk of whipping your multi-tool around because these aren't designed to be aggressively opened with one hand like the OHT. But you can lube them up and break them into the point where they kind of open like a balisong. And if you really had to, you could open them up with one hand. But again, doesn't work the same, not designed the same. So the OHT has its pros in that area. So as far as the rest of the specs, I really haven't gone through and done a ton of research on the different pivots they use. I think the handle materials here feel like they're just a standard aluminum scale. Otherwise, I'm assuming it's just 420 HC for most of the tools, and the rest of it's going to be pretty standard stuff, just pivots, liner locks, all that. So again, I'll do eventually a full review on one of these one day, because I will probably end up adding one to my collection because they're super popular. Not as popular as, again, I think not the Super Tool. Super Tool is probably number 2. The Leatherman Wave Plus, actually, I think has been like the most popular one for the last decade. I ended up getting my father one of those for Christmas. There is a video of the Leatherman Wave on this channel if you want to go scoot over and check that one out. As far as this goes, will I buy one for my own personal use right away? No, probably first I'll end up getting a rebar, which I don't have. I don't have my own Wave. There's a lot of Leatherman tools out there that probably will get a lot of more use even than the signal, because these are missing the signal in a lot of the standard tools that a lot of Leathermans have. These are more specific, a little more niche to their certain, military for this one, and a little bit of woods and hiking stuff for the signal. The OHT's got, I think, 16 tools, which is most of the standard tools that you're going to find on the other Leathermans. You're just, again, trading off size and bulkiness and weight for the extra little one-handed fling. But again, would I buy it? Probably not the first pick. Am I probably going to grab one eventually because they are fun to play with and it's fun to compare between some of the other Leathermans? Probably so. At this point in time, I'll just say good, not great, not something that I really am going to go for as a left-handed person. I feel like this thing wasn't really designed for me because most of the tools I need are right-hand accessible first. So yeah, just small little details, but check it out yourself. Probably worth grabbing one and checking it out in a knife store before you buy one. I've heard mostly good things from the guys that I work with who've had them, but I know a couple of guys were like, damn, I wish I would have went something a little bit more generic. So yeah, keep that in mind. Otherwise, feel free to click that big, beautiful thumb down in the bottom left of the video. That's probably the best way to help the channel out, and subscribe. And if you're not getting video notifications, you can go and click the notification bell and turn it on. And all the other stuff that helps the algorithm help me out and eventually help you out if you want to see these ridiculous videos. So see you on the next one. This is the Hard On Gear channel signing off.